You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
So excited you could join me here today on this wellness and weight loss edition of the Cabral Concept, where we're going to be going into the 4 cleanses that everyone should be doing yearly. Now, a lot of these come from things that in traditional times and ancient times they've been doing for thousands of years. We've kind of overlooked them and forgotten about them, to tell you the truth, but also a few modern day ones. And that's because we're dealing with toxicities that never existed a couple thousand years ago. So I want to go over both of those today. But here's the interesting thing. A lot of time on these Wellness and Weight Loss Wednesdays, we're talking about how to transform our body and, of course, how to get healthy. Well, a lot of the time, the reason why people get stuck with the weight loss or the body transformation or the inflammation, kind of the puffiness where they might be holding on to a little extra water weight, any of those things, is because their body isn't balanced. And their body isn't balanced because it's out of equilibrium. And what that means is that there's something at an underlying root cause level that's holding them back from being able to strip the body fat off, from being able to drop the inflammation, and along with that, all the toxic water weight, all the puffiness, the lymphatic congestion, all of those things that don't go with being a healthy human being. So what I want to talk about today is the way that our ancient ancestors were able to overcome a lot of those issues are with either seasonal or yearly based cleansing. Now, again, I have no problem with juice cleansing. I like doing green juices. I like doing all of those things. But what we're going to talk about are very specific things, very specific cleanses that have been done since most likely the dawn of human time. And they've been done with herbs, and they've been done with fasting and certain modalities like that. And that's what I want to explain today. So the first one I want to go over and kind of dive right into things today is something that's existed in every culture, but is most pronounced and most well known for sure in South America. And here's why. So we know that parasites, that most of the literature right now says about 1 in 4 people has a parasite. That's an enormous number. But somewhere around 25% of the population, you can go to the CDC, Center for Disease Control, and you can look all this information up online. You're welcome to do that. But there's a reason why that for thousands of years, we can look at Chinese medicine, and we can look at the herbs and Ayurvedic medicine. You can look at Egyptian medicine. You can look at Native American medicine. You can look at South American-based medicine and shamanism and all those different things. They were always using certain herbs to literally deworm people. That's what it was called, deworming. And they would go through this once or twice a year. They would call it a deworming process. And that's because parasites are literally worms. There's these pathogens that we get into our system, and we can get into our system from many different ways, but it could be contaminated water. That's an easy way. Contaminated or undercooked meat or food. You can get them right on a salad bar, right? So it's all of these ways that we can get the parasites, but also it's worse now in 2018. And the reason is this, that so many people have low stomach acid. So many people are put on PPIs, or they're put on acid reducers of all kinds, or they're reducing their own acid by taking things like Tums or something like that. Well, what happens is it then allows the parasites an open pass to go right into the gut, right into those intestines. And the reason is that typically stomach acid would kill a lot of these parasites. And it's one reason when I studied overseas, I made sure to take hot bitters with each meal. And I took HCl, betaine HCl with pepsin, and that created more heat in my stomach. And it would kill a lot of the antigens or bacteria just in general that I wasn't used to. Now, do I take those on a daily basis? No. But there's supplements, right? So they supplemented what my body needed when I was working and living over in India or Sri Lanka or in China, where my body wouldn't be quite used to that. Now, did I use them in Europe? No. Do I use them in the US? No. but that's because my stomach acid is where it should be, and my body's obviously more used to and accustomed to the food in those particular areas. So here's what they did though. Every year, at least once a year, there would be a parasite cleanse and protocol. Now, I'm bringing you the information. You can decide what you want to do with it. I mean, that's always the bottom line. I actually want to give you what a lot of the herbs should be in every single parasite cleanse that you decide to do. So the first one, first and foremost, is going to be something called wormwood, sweet wormwood. Literally coming, when you see the word worm right in that, that is one of the best dewormers out there, without a doubt, one of the best. And the second best, hands down, would be black walnut hulls, all right? So black walnut hulls would be the second best one. And again, if you can get a product that combines all of those, then absolutely fantastic. A few more that are absolutely fantastic are berberine and olive leaf. Those are a couple of my favorites. And then other items that we use in my practice are anything from, well, obviously garlic, right? You could chop up and swallow raw garlic. That could be something you could do before bed. But other amazing things would be oregano. We always talk about oregano, how great it is, right? Echinacea, those are all fantastic, but it has to have that sweet wormwood. It should have ideally some garlic, but again, you can take that in from a lot of whole food, and you'll definitely want those black walnut hulls. Now, there's one more thing that we use from a functional medicine perspective that wasn't always available throughout the ages that makes your parasite cleansing that much easier, and that's called a biofilm disruptor. So we use a product with it's a high amount of proteases. Okay, proteases are just protein digesting enzymes, but it also contains something called chitosanase that helps break down the outer layer of yeast and other types of pathogens in the gut itself. And then it has all sorts of different enzymes like lysosome-based and cellulase-based, so it can break down all different types of, basically a biofilm, to make it easy, would be like the house or the protective layer over these parasites and bacteria. And so that's why we use it in my practice. It works exceptionally well. I'll link up to everything today, but what I want to do is share with you all the different cleanses that people did to always keep their body at an equilibrium, at its healthiest point every year. And we use the ParaPro support, we use Biocidin, a great product, and we use Florafilm. So I'll link those up today. You can decide to use what's best for you, but certainly as we're in the summer, fall season, these would be smart items to potentially use. So think about that, especially if you're someone that eats a good amount of fish, if you eat meat, if you eat from salad bars, if you don't have a lot of stomach acid, doing a parasite-based cleanse once a year or so would be fantastic. If you want to test for parasites to see if you do have them, you can do a simple stool-based test. Really, it's just a 3-day stool collection. It's very, very easy. Collect a small amount of stool each day, and then you'll just ship it back to the lab, and we'll give you the results of whether you have any parasites, whether you have bacterial overgrowth like Klebsiella, E. coli, and also H. pylori. We test for H. pylori as well. So that's a great lab test. Again, I'll link everything up today. Just go to stephencabral.com/887. All right. So next up, the next cleanse that I want to go over with you right now is the purification of the blood on a yearly basis, sometimes twice a year. Okay. Easy ways to do that during the summer is getting more sun, without a doubt. That's a big one. Doing some type of fasting, so we're basically cleaning out the excess. What does fasting do? Well, I've spoken about this definitely in depth on the podcast, but when you are not eating, you are not allowing more toxins into the body, or ama. Ama is simply breakdown byproduct of food or any type of toxicity. Ama is a word that we used in Ayurvedic-based methodology or Ayurvedic-based times to talk about toxins that enter the body. Now, food is probably the greatest, believe it or not, source of toxins. Now, even with healthy food, we're getting metabolic byproducts. We're getting metabolic breakdown and oxidation every time we do eat. Now, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, and of course, we do need to eat. But what fasting does is it allows our body, believe it or not, when it doesn't have new foods, new proteins coming in, that it can actually go into the bloodstream and can go after cells, necrotic tissue, dead tissue, or pathogenic-based tissue that it can start to break down and use that as a fuel source. But also, your immune system will be ramped up to a higher degree, and it will be able to clean house. That's a good way to put it, clean house, and remove a lot of these pathogens that are on our own. So, great way to purify the blood. Again, what else would you use? Well, back in the day, for sure, they'd be using things like beetroot, beets. Anything red would be a great blood cleanser. Okay, so beets for sure, the beetroot itself, but also beet leaves. When I juice, sometimes they're very, very bitter, but I'll juice a couple beet leaves as well. And people cook with beet leaves. I remember my grandfather used to add some beet leaves in there, and those would be very, very bitter, but very cleansing for the blood. I don't know that he knew that specifically, but it was kind of handed down, I'm sure, to him. One thing we do from a state-of-the-art perspective is the Dr. Cabral detox. Now, if you're working with your own functional medicine doctor, then absolutely fantastic. There's a bunch of functional medicine detoxes out there. The one that we use, I formulated every single ingredient in that, and that's just called the Dr. Cabral detox. You can choose the 7, 14, or 21 day. I've spoken about this before, so I'm not going to go in depth about it today. But you can also look up the podcast on how to do a functional medicine detox. Now, for the functional medicine detox, I do one seasonally. It's an Ayurvedic process as well, where each season you're trying to clean the body and help it transition better. So especially in New England, we have true 4 seasons. And so we go from spring into summer. And then in spring, basically, we have all of this heat built up in the body. We have a lot of dampness, a lot of wetness. What the 7-day detox does, and we just did that basically to get ready for the summer. We did it during the week before the 4th of July in our community at cabralsupportgroup.com. There was a couple hundred of us that did it. We're basically removing all that dampness, all of that water from the spring season, and allows us to better transition into summer. Again, this is in the United States. I know a lot of people in Australia listen to this. They're in their winter, and it's a little different, of course. But still, every season is about every 12 weeks or so. It's a great time to transition. In the fall, September, I'll be doing my next detox into fall as well, which will, again, remove a lot of that heat, moving me into that harvest-based season of the fall. And then, of course, January, getting into the winter-based season, and then spring as well. So a great thing to do, probably, number one in most forms of medicine is a seasonal-based cleanse, seasonal-based detox. This is based on liver purification because remember, the liver is literally the organ that cleans all the blood in your body, and it does that every 3 to 6 minutes. Every 3 minutes, if you speed up the process by doing things like coffee enemas, and typically about every 6 minutes, all the blood in your body has been filtered through it, and it does that 24/7, 365, as they say. So the Dr. Cabral detox, I'm obviously a huge proponent of, but you can find the best functional medicine detox for you as well, especially if you're in Europe. Listen to this, and we don't yet ship to Europe. In the Rain Barrel Effect, I actually give you every single ingredient, and as always, all the ingredients are posted on each of the product protocols so that you can decide what's best for you, your product, another product that's recommended to you, or one of the Equilibrium Nutrition ones as well. All right, the next one, so important. This is more of a modern day one than anything else, and that's a heavy metal cleanse or a heavy metal protocol. Why is this so important? Well, here's the modern day dilemma. The modern day dilemma is we eat fish, especially things like tuna or swordfish or Chilean sea bass, and larger fish. And these larger fish have higher levels of mercury. But now, almost any fish that you're getting from the sea, especially any of the medium to larger size ones, have more metals. And the reason they're going to have more metals is because there's more pollution in the sea. And as the fish gets larger and as it gets older, it accumulates more and more toxicity. So we're eating the fish because we want to get the omega-3s and we want a healthier form of protein, whatever it might be, but we're getting a lot of these toxicities. Another thing is that we live in cities. A lot of us live in cities and we ride in cars, right? Or some type of transportation. And again, there's a lot of these heavy metals in the atmosphere and all around us. Getting vaccines, a lot of people choose to get vaccinated. And with those vaccines, there are heavy metals in all of those. And that even includes the flu vaccine. What about dental mercury amalgams in the mouth, or silver amalgams as they're called? There's no silver really in them, but there is aluminum, there is mercury. And so we have to watch out for that because as those, well, obviously when they're put into our mouth, but as we age and those mercury amalgams age as well, we chew and they begin to open up. In the Rain Barrel Effect in my book, I actually showed you what mine looked like, and they were upturned on the edges. When they were magnified, you could see that. And I was getting just small microscopic amounts, but all of that adds up, right? Because you don't get Alzheimer's when you're 20 years old. You get it in your 60s and 70s and 80s and beyond. And the reason is that it's just one reason, but one of the reasons is that we can begin to accumulate more toxins in the body, and namely one of those being heavy metals for sure, aluminum being a big one. Other exposures, tap water, right? Tap water. A lot of people don't even think this, but the ice cubes that you get in an iced coffee, in an iced tea, that's typically from tap water. and that tap water contains aluminum. All right. So if we look at all of these things, it's typically a good idea once a year for all people to do a heavy metal cleanse or heavy metal detox or heavy metal protocol. And the main things that you can do, I did a whole podcast on this, literally a podcast on how to naturally remove between 90 and 93% of all the heavy metals from your body in just 6 weeks. I'm going to link all of these up today, but it's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. Yes, parsley and all of those things work great. But again, let's just go with what's clinically proven. Because here's the nice thing. We know all the herbs that work, but why not use them at the dosages that we need? And also just say, okay, like this is what I need to do. I'm going to do it. And then I'm going to be the peace of mind of feeling, okay, I'm going to be healthier. So here's what we do. We use Craxel chlorella. Okay. We're going to use it from a clean source. We're going to use cilantro. We're going to use vitamin C. And then we're also going to use, again, a biofilm-based disruptor. If we do that, we know that we're going to be able to eliminate these heavy metals because we're going to use natural chelators or binders that hold and grab onto these heavy metals, such as mercury, aluminum, lead, and it's going to draw it from our body naturally. So, such a amazing process. And again, if you want a lab test for that, you could do a hair tissue mineral analysis to look to see what your elevated levels potentially may be for mercury, aluminum, and other of the heavy metals as well. Lead would be in one of those, arsenic. So you can run that for sure. You can also run a complete thyroid, which would look at arsenic and mercury and aluminum and bromide. And we can, for the toxicity test, you could do that as well for like, a lot of people say like, oh, I don't really think that I have any toxins in my body. Well, you can actually check for pesticides and items like that by doing a toxicity test. Again, I'll link all of those up and you'll be able to see for yourself if you choose to. The last one I want to go over today is one of those things that I would say it's almost a must do. Not enough people do it. And I put myself in that as well. But again, I use this at least once to twice a year. I would say definitely twice a year. And it's great when you do any of these other cleanses. Okay, so if you do a parasite protocol, if you do a Dr. Ball detox, if you do a heavy metal protocol, I didn't mention the Candida and bacterial overgrowth protocol. And the reason is that doesn't need to be done yearly unless you do have yeast overgrowth, Candida overgrowth, or some type of bacterial overgrowth. Because that's an actual functional medicine protocol for those people that, they do have a lot of the gas, the bloating, the halitosis, a lot of the skin issues that come along with the Candida and bacterial overgrowth. And again, you can run an organic acids test for that. You can run a stool test for that. But it's not one of those things that everyone should do on a yearly basis, because if you don't have the issue, well, you don't necessarily need to do it. Even though it's not necessarily bad for you, you don't need to do it. But the parasite, the Dr. Ball detox, or a functional medicine liver-based detox, a heavy metal, all fantastic. But then after you do each one of those, it's great. It's great. It's a nice add-on, but it's great to do an intestinal-based cleanse. Now, what is an intestinal cleanse? Well, a lot of people mix up an intestinal cleanse with a detox. They're different. An intestinal cleanse is going to have things such as bentonite clay, activated charcoal, some type of cassia, some type of laxative-based effect, which allows for your body to bind up what is currently in the intestines and safely remove it. Now, again, this has been done for thousands of years with all natural products. So why, after you do a parasite protocol or halfway through a parasite protocol, that you'd want to do an intestinal cleanse? Well, as you're killing these parasites, you'd want to bind them up and make sure you pull them out of your body. And that's why, again, if you're not having at least 1 to 2 bowel movements per day, I can't recommend working enough on that. Like, that should be one of the first things that you do. You can use our constipation protocol, but it also look to say like, hey, I would go back to the constipation-based podcast that I've done before. You can just go to stephencabral.com/podcast, type in constipation. It's all free information right there. Here's why. As we're killing these things, as we're removing them from our body, we need to make sure that all of it gets out of our body, right? That if we bind up metals and if we bind up these things, yes, we can sweat them out, we can huff them out, we can urinate them out, but we also, a very large amount is eliminated in the bile, and the bile gets dropped into the intestines. And those toxins then get removed through 1 to 2 or more bowel movements per day. So that's why the intestinal cleanse will ensure you to have at least 2 to 3 bowel movements per day. Normal bowel movements, meaning yes, there'll be a little bit more bulk to them, but you can do an intestinal cleanse. You don't have to take off work, anything like that. It just means that it's going to allow you to have 3 bowel movements per day. We tell you how to do it if you're not having 3, and if you're having more, we tell you how to cut back a little bit. So that's what the intestinal cleanse is all about, but also the bentonite clay, the activated charcoal. These are binding up whatever's in the intestines, holding on to them, and old decayed fecal matter, and pulling it out of the body. Now, it's also why, though, people ask me, hey, can I do activated charcoal every day? And I say, no. And they say, can I do bentonite clay every day? And I say, no. And the reason is this, is that they're meant to remove poisons, and they're meant to bind up other things in the intestines out of your body, but they can also bind up a lot of the good minerals, right? It can bind up a lot of the zinc and calcium and anything your body's trying to absorb, which is why we don't do them on a daily basis. Remember, these are supplements to be used as cleansers, and as periodically we do them. So if you said, okay, I want to do an intestinal cleanse quarterly as well, meaning seasonally, I would say, okay, no problem with that. That makes sense. But really, once or twice a year, after the parasite protocol, after the heavy metal detox, or if you do a candida and bacterial overgrowth protocol, halfway through, highly recommended. The intestinal cleanse is more of like a supercharger or add-on to a lot of these other cleanses as well. So that's where I'm coming from. These are all based on ancient-based philosophies, but they make a lot of sense, right? We're exposed to pathogens and potentially parasites, and 1 out of 4 people have it. And if you don't lab test using a stool test, you don't really know if you have a parasite or not, because sometimes people are asymptomatic. Like there's just not a lot going on. And then with the Dr. Ball Detox we talked about, well, it's an accumulation factor. Again, if you read the book, The Rain Barrel Effect, you'd see that a lot of these things just slowly accumulate over time, meaning like autoimmune disease doesn't happen overnight. Hashimoto's, rheumatoid arthritis, and skin issues, psoriasis, eczema, all of these are signs of something is imbalanced in the body. And also the blood is impure. Like that's the bottom line. The blood has more toxins in it. If we get our liver to function better, then our body can eliminate them at a faster degree. Remember, at no point are we telling our body how to heal. Remember, all of these cleanses or protocols are meant to give our body more of what it needs to better do its job, because it will always do its job if it's put in the position to win, put in the position to heal, because it has more of what it needs to defeat what it's trying to go after. The heavy metal detox. This is a modern day dilemma that we are all facing right now. Our water, our cities that we live in, the dental work that we have done, vaccinations, fish, a lot of these foods, again, even your veggies that are washed with tap water can have some of these heavy metals on them, pesticide sprays. So keep all of that in mind. Really important to look at. Again, you can lab test for these. You can do a hair tissue mineral analysis. And then the intestinal cleanse. The intestinal cleanse will allow you once a year, twice a year, or after one of these protocols to really bind up old fecal matter or whatever it might be in the intestines and just get it out. So important to do because, again, Hippocrates, the founder, right? The founder of what we think of as our current form of medicine, basically said, all disease begins in the colon, that large intestine. Let's keep it clean. Let's keep it moving. So very, very important. So really enjoy doing shows like this where I get to bring you the ancient-based philosophies of what people did to keep themselves well, to keep themselves healthy, really, against all odds, but also what we have now proven in science and what we can bring to an even more state-of-the-art level. Hopefully this was helpful today. Again, at stephencabral.com/887. I will link all of these up in the show notes, all of the protocols, all of the ingredients so that you can look at it for yourself. And I'll link up the lab tests as well if you decide to go kind of deeper into what you may have going on with your own health. Thank you so much for tuning in today. And as always, if this show was helpful, please do pass it along to someone else it may serve. Before you go, I wanted to share a personal story with you. The real reason I began to get well finally is because I figured out what was wrong with me. And that might seem pretty obvious, but I went from doctor to doctor for over 2 years before discovering at-home functional medicine lab testing. These are the labs that enabled me to finally figure out what was wrong with my hormones, blood sugar, electrolytes, and gut health. And once I knew what was wrong, I could then follow a proven plan in order to rebalance my body from the inside out. This is why I believe so strongly in functional medicine lab testing and why I've made it my mission to share these labs with the world. Now at equa.life, you can order an at-home lab test or lab bundle for you and your family and be able to complete it within the week. Plus, The equal life difference is that you're not left to try to read and figure out these labs on your own. We explain what your lab numbers mean, what they mean in the much bigger picture, and then how to go about rebalancing your body in order to heal. To see our full selection of lab tests, or to set up a free lab selection call to find out what labs may be best for you, simply head on over to equa.life/labs. And do remember, we ship these all over the world. To find out more and to set up your free lab selection call, simply head on over to equa.life/labs. That's EQUI.LIFE/labs.